gonna do that one. It's another story I could do. Another captivating. Okay, so I'm gonna do a story time video. I was reluctant to do one of these to begin with, but I have nothing better to film right now, and I figured why not. So this is gonna be a twofer. I'm gonna do two different stories, and I am going to try and do them a little more creatively than I've seen on the website prior. So if I'm gonna do a storytime video with as little substance as possible, as these story videos typically do, I am gonna do it right. So the first of my two stories is going to be the time I learned to play the accordion. I know it sounds extremely exciting, but it's not. It's really not. So let me set the scene for you. This is a few years ago. I was about 10 or 11 at the time, and my mom and I had just moved into our new place, 2 houses before the one that we're at now, out near, where was this? Out by the Salvation Army, pretty close to there, here in Spokane. And as we were about 5 or 6 blocks away from that Salvation Army, that's where I typically went after school every once in a while to do the after-school activities, the daycare, etc. To go along with the after-school activities and the daycare and the teen center type deal that they did, my mom and I both also went to the church services every Sunday at the Salvation Army. Now, my family's not particularly religious. I tend to follow Christianity, but for the most part, nothing too extreme. But we still went to church. Not sure why, but we did. The first few months were pretty normal, just typical church. I was bored to death by it. I never wanted to go do Sunday school. I was a very introverted kid at the time. And so I stayed with my mom usually doing the church services, but I was just bored out of my mind. It was awful. After, again, 2 or 3 months, a older man noticed how just distraught I was by this church service. It was genuinely horrible. And he had asked me, well, talked to my mom first and then asked me if I wanted to learn how to play the accordion. Now, at the time, I didn't know what an accordion was. The only experience I had knowing about them was Weird Al Yankovic, and I am a Weird Al stan. I love Weird Al Yankovic. I've actually I have 2 of his albums. Here, one second. I actually have 2 of his albums. The Mandatory Fun and the Apocalypse albums, and as opposed to that, I've gone to one of his concerts here locally and listened to him quite frequently on Apple Music. But that's aside the case. The only knowledge I had of an accordion as an instrument was from Weird Al. So obviously, him being my idol, I figured, yeah, totally, let's do accordion lessons. Totally not taking into account that it was very weird for an older man. Like, he had to have been at least 70, 60 to be asking me to do accordion lessons for him. Just out of nowhere. I was the only kid, by the way. So we started these lessons. We would meet twice a week, Sundays and then Tuesdays. Tuesdays being the day that the teen center youth group type thing was happening. So instead of doing that, I would skip it and go do accordion lessons with this old man at the Salvation Army. And after a while, it was extremely weird. Now, I never knew either of my grandfathers growing up particularly well. The one on my father's side, he had a stroke when I was relatively young, and then passed away of that after a year or 2. And the grandfather on my mom's side, no idea, barely even met him. So this was, for little 11-year-old me, this was pretty cool to have this grandfatherly bond kind of just start to build over time out of nowhere. And yeah, it continued, and I was really becoming to get connected to this old man. So nearly a year now, I'm getting extremely proficient at the accordion. Uh, as you could guess, surprisingly, an 11-year-old boy getting pretty good at the accordion. I could barely even hold the thing. He had this giant emerald accordion that he would have me practice on, like the keys and then the like the pumping and everything. And I could barely hold the thing. Like I would have to be leaning up against the table with it strapped around me, trying to mess around with it like that. But yeah, I was getting pretty proficient at it, and I noticed that like I at the time I just assumed that because like I was getting so great at the accordion that he didn't think we needed to meet as often. But our meeting times cut from being Sundays and Tuesdays to being like every other week or so on like a Thursday or like a Friday, and it was really weird. Like I just figured it was like because I was getting really good at the accordion, but it definitely wasn't that. It had turned out that he was extremely ill, like just older sickness. Not sure exactly what it was. He was always in a wheelchair. I know that much. One of those cool motorized wheelchairs, and he rarely like talked full on. He would more just guide me on what to do and stuff, and talk when he really needed to. But yeah, it turned out that he was very ill, and the normal scheduled like meeting times he needed to go and do treatments or go to the hospital. I assume it was some form of cancer, as insensitive it is to just assume the illness that this guy had. Our meetings went from every week or so to just not being at all, and I liked doing it, but I figured, all right, whatever, I'll just have more free time to play video games or whatever. I didn't have the most friends at the time, so it was whatever. But yeah, it 4 or 5 months had passed without a lesson, and we still went to that church. So it's not like we just stopped going to the church because I stopped getting lessons from this guy. I still went to the church. I started going to the Sunday school and everything because, I mean, what else was I going to do? I had spent the last, God knows how much time just practicing the accordion with this older man. So I started going to the Sunday school, started hanging out with kids there, and I'd almost completely forgotten about him until I remembered, and this is extremely selfish of me, that this guy said that when I was done learning the accordion from him, that he was going to let me have this emerald accordion, this super nice, like it had to have been in the thousands, accordion. And it really touched me. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like that's a really big deal. I didn't realize how big of a deal it was at the time. I was just an 11-year-old boy thinking, oh, free stuff. But yeah, I had realized he said that, and I was confused. So I went searching around in one of the services with my mom, and I noticed his wife there. She had been there every once in a while. She didn't go with him all the time. It was usually just him. But I had noticed her because, her appearance was similar to the woman that was with him every once in a while, pushing his wheelchair around when he didn't have the electric one. But so I asked her as kindly as I could after one of the services, like, hey, can I have my accordion? And her answer was pretty benign. I can't remember it exactly now, but it was along the lines of no. Typical, like, can't really do that. At this point in time, I assume, this is what I tell my friends, but I assume that somehow in the will, the accordion was sent somewhere else. So like legally, she couldn't really give it to me. But as an 11-year-old boy, I interpret it as, wow, this rude woman isn't giving me my free toy now. But yeah, I learned about the accordion not being there. So I asked her next, like where this older man had been, where my interim backup grandpa had been after all this time. And she tried to break it to me as nice as possible. I didn't want to just tell an 11-year-old boy this, but I learned that he had passed away. So that was pretty rough. After some explaining from my mom and everything, I totally got it. I talked to one of the priests there, actually. One of the higher up priest at the Salvation Army, but my friend's dad, who volunteered for the Sunday school services, but was also like a member of the church as one of the priests. But yeah, it was pretty rough. That was like, I'll be honest, I think that was my first like instance of actually understanding and like fully being forced to comprehend the that aspect of like life. Like that was probably my first time actually having to think of, okay, well now he's dead, so we can't talk to each other anymore. We can't hang out anymore. And yeah, that was that. So the next story I'm gonna do, total complete deviation from the first one, is the time I was randomly selected at the SeaTac International Airport. So my cousin Jackson is about 11 years old, 12 years old. That's how I made the link, the age link. We had been pretty good cousin friends for most of both of our lives, and it was weird because the first 5 years or whatever of his life, he was in Spokane. We would just hang out every weekend or so. He was one of my only real friends at the time. So when his stepfather went into the Air Force and started getting stationed at different places, that was kind of whack. Like we, kind of lost that connection a little bit. But I bring that in because when he would come and visit for a week, we would hang out as much as we could that time. And then the weekend that he had to fly out, my aunt, his biological dad's mom, so my aunt, his grandma, would drive us both to Seattle, and we would stay there for a night, screw around the whole day before we sent him off on the plane, like go to the zoo, go to a movie, whatever, just mess around in Seattle, and then send him off back to Delaware or Alaska, or I think he was in Hawaii for a little bit, or wherever. So yeah, this was relatively new at the time. I was about, I want to say 8th grade, so 2014 is when this happened. Give it a solid date. So I tan very, very dark. If I can find a picture, I'll put it here. If not, it'll just be me waving my hands like an idiot in this video. But I tan very dark in the summer, and almost to a fault. Not to say that I want to relate them directly, but you're kind of seeing where I'm going. So I was very tan at the time we were in Seattle, and I was very dirty too that day because we had gone to a park and just messed around for a while. So I was very grimy and dirty. I guess I looked suspect. I wouldn't guess that a 14-year-old would look suspect, but I just had this blue tank top on, these basketball shorts. Sorry, that's my watch. These basketball shorts and, messy hair and everything. So we were on our way through the airport. Everything was going fine. TSA security, all that, taking our shoes off, putting them back on, taking off our belt, taking our earrings, necklaces, false teeth, all of that, just to make sure we don't have any bombs on us. We had gotten through, everything was fine. But it was when we got in the line to board the plane that we ran into an issue. See, that day, I believe it was a Sunday or a Saturday, can't remember exactly. It was ungodly busy that day. Like, it was packed. Like, I swear to God, I don't think you could have walked an inch without bumping into somebody. But yeah, it was really busy, and this line was just, standstill traffic through and through. One of those weaving through lines to get to the boarding area. And I had noticed the TSA like bomb dog walking around just sniffing like a maniac. Sniffing around, going up to people, leaving them. I thought nothing of it. I was like, oh, that's a cute dog, whatever. Until it got to me. And I'm not scared of dogs. I never have been. I'm actually a pretty big fan of dogs. I love dogs. I got a pug and a wiener dog out there right now, just hanging out. But this dog was terrifying. It got up to me, and it was screaming. I don't want to say barking, because barking does not, connote the actual, emotional power that this dog was holding with its yelling. It was screaming at me with just fury. Like, I could feel the foam from its spit hitting me. So naturally, something was awry. Again, I was just, 14, 15 at the time, so I thought nothing of it. I was just hanging out like, oh, geez, this dog is a real big jerk. Until the TSA agent came and grabbed my arm quite furiously. Like, just skinny little boy arms. I'm just standing there, and a tall, like, I want to guess he was about 6'1", 6'2". I couldn't really size him up at the time. Again, I was just a kid, so I didn't really have too much spatial awareness like that. But he kind of grabbed my arm, said, "I need you to come with me, sir." I wasn't used to hearing the word "sir" attached to my name, so it was kind of weird. The whole situation was ridiculous. Let me just put it that way. But yeah, he grabbed my arm, said, "All right, I need you to come with me, sir." So I was like, "Oh, all right." And meanwhile, my cousin and my aunt are kind of freaking out. They're like, "What the hell is going on?" And naturally, I would be too. If I was an aunt, whenever I am an aunt, and I'm just there with my grandson and my nephew gets pulled away by TSA from the bomb inspection dog, I would be pretty shaken to my core, to say the least. So I was pulled aside. The TSA agent scrubbed my hands down, did their bomb scrubbing procedures, had me go through the detector test, and then this older woman, not older, that's mean, like 30s maybe, the very stereotypical TSA agent, did the pat down of me. That was odd. I didn't like that at all. That was whack. And they were very rude, to be completely honest. But they did the pat down, they did the magnet thing, the bomb hand check, and after about 10 minutes, just this look of like grimace came across their face that, like, I guess I was the wrong person, because the dude just said, "All right, you can go back in line." I went back in line. I didn't hear another thing from them. I want to say, I could say it was random selection, but at the same time, I felt a little targeted, to be honest. And I'm more worried about who actually had a bomb on them that was not inspected by that TSA, squadron, because there were people in front of us, behind us, and again, we were all packed together. So who's to say that the aura of this bomb residue didn't float from somebody else onto myself to where this dog could have noticed it? Yeah, that's an issue. So yeah, I was randomly selected and put back in the line. We went through, we sent Jackson off back to Delaware, at the time is where he was. Drove back to Seattle, and we haven't really talked about it since. I mention it every once in a while because I like bringing it up when I'm like hanging out with people, like, "Oh yeah, I got randomly selected at the airport." And, people don't believe me, and then I tell the story, and then it's just, ends up being a really boring story, which I think is happening right now. Like, from the accordion story that I told before this to this, it's kind of a mixed bag, of wow, that's relatively interesting to, okay. But yeah, that's essentially where I'm gonna leave this one. First time ever trying a story type video of this caliber. I don't know how I like it yet. It's more just setting my camera up in front of my desk here and talking to it, and that's all right. Similar to vlogs, I get this feeling that it's like these storytime videos don't really have too much substance as well. Like, if people like them, that's awesome. I can see the appeal, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I can see the appeal. At the same time, I don't really get them. So yeah, that's all I've got for this one. Not sure how people usually cut these ones off. I'm gonna put one of these on. Although I don't have a vinyl player, like a record player, so.
Tell Cease what you called in at the convention center.
A pizza.